What happens when a duchess walks onto a late-night set expecting royal treatment but gets reality instead? In just 30 seconds, one comment from Greg Gutfeld would expose an attitude that viewers couldn't believe. This is the story of the most explosive interview meltdown in late-night history. The studio lights were hot that evening as Greg Gutfeld settled into his chair, ready for what he thought would be a standard celebrity interview. His producers had been buzzing about this booking for weeks. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, was scheduled to appear on his show. It was supposed to be a conversation about her latest projects, maybe some light discussion about life in California. Nobody expected what was about to unfold. Meghan walked onto the set with an entourage that seemed more fitting for a head of state than a talk show guest. Greg noticed immediately. 3 assistants, 2 security personnel, and someone whose only job appeared to be holding a particular brand of bottled water. He'd interviewed presidents with less fanfare. "Welcome to the show," Greg said, extending his hand as Meghan approached the guest chair. She looked at his hand for a moment, then sat down without shaking it. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Greg, ever the professional, pulled his hand back and smiled, brushing it off his nerves. "Thanks for having me," Meghan said, though her tone suggested she was doing him the favor. "We're excited you're here," Greg replied. "Let's dive right in. You've been in California for a while now. How are you adjusting to life outside the royal spotlight?" Meghan's expression changed. "Well, Greg, I wouldn't say I'm outside any spotlight. If anything, the American media is far more intrusive than the British press ever was." Greg raised an eyebrow. Anyone who'd followed her story knew that wasn't quite accurate, but he let it slide. "Interesting perspective. So you feel the coverage here has been unfair?" "Unfair doesn't even begin to describe it," she said, leaning forward. "Do you know what it's like to have every single move criticized? Every outfit analyzed? Every word twisted?" "Actually," Greg said, keeping his tone light, "I'm on television 5 nights a week sharing my opinions. I might have some idea." The audience laughed. It was a gentle joke, the kind that usually breaks the ice. Meghan didn't laugh. "That's not the same thing at all," she said coldly. "You choose to put yourself out there. I was born into a situation, married into another, and now I'm trying to live my truth while the world refuses to let me breathe." Greg nodded slowly. "Right, but you also chose to do numerous interviews, a podcast, documentaries. Those were choices, weren't they?" "Those were necessary," Meghan snapped. "How else was I supposed to tell my side of the story? The institution certainly wasn't going to do it." "Fair enough," Greg said. "Let's talk about your new project then. I understand you're working on something related to empowering women." "Yes," Meghan said, her posture straightening. "It's about giving voice to the voiceless, women who've been marginalized, silenced, pushed aside by patriarchal systems." "Sounds noble," Greg said. "Can you give us some specifics about how the project actually works?" Meghan paused. "Well, it's still in development. The important thing is the message. We need to fundamentally restructure how society views women in power." "Sure," Greg said, "but what does the project actually do? Is it a foundation, a media company, a charity?" "It's bigger than any one label," Meghan insisted. "It's a movement." Greg could feel the interview slipping into vague territory. He decided to try a different angle. "You've talked a lot about privacy over the years. How do you balance wanting privacy with maintaining a public profile?" Meghan's eyes narrowed. "That's a gotcha question." "It's not," Greg said calmly. "It's a genuine question. You've spoken about wanting privacy for your family, but you also do interviews and public appearances. I'm just trying to understand how you navigate that. What you call public appearances, I call using my platform for good," Meghan said. "There's a difference between seeking attention and using the attention you have responsibly." "Okay," Greg said. "So, when you did the interview where you discussed private conversations with family members, that was using your platform responsibly?" The audience went silent. Meghan's face hardened. Those were my experiences, she said. I had every right to share them. Absolutely, Greg agreed. I'm not disputing your right. I'm asking about the choice, because you've also said you value privacy. You're twisting my words, Meghan said, her voice rising slightly. I'm literally using your words, Greg replied. I'm just asking you to clarify what seems like a contradiction. The contradiction, Meghan said icily, is that people like you think you can question people like me. The studio went dead quiet. Greg blinked. People like me? Yes, Meghan said. Media personalities who've never experienced real scrutiny, real pressure, real consequences. You sit here in your comfortable chair making jokes, and you think that gives you the right to interrogate someone who's actually been through something. Greg's demeanor shifted. The playful host was gone. Meghan, I've been in media for decades. I've been criticized, threatened, and attacked more times than I can count. My family has been dragged into controversies because of my work. So I do actually know something about pressure. It's not the same, she insisted. You keep saying that, Greg said, but you don't get to decide whose struggles are valid. Everyone has their own challenges. My challenges involved an entire institution working against me, Meghan shot back. Your challenges involve people disagreeing with your political opinions. Don't compare the two. Greg took a breath. I'm not comparing them. I'm saying that dismissing someone else's experiences because you think yours are worse is exactly the kind of behavior you claim to be against. How dare you, Meghan said, her voice shaking. You have no idea what I've been through. You're right, Greg said. I don't. Because I'm not you, just like you're not me. That's why we have conversations, to understand each other. But you walked in here with an attitude that suggests you're above being asked basic questions. Basic questions? Meghan repeated. You've been attacking me since I sat down. I've been asking you to explain your positions, Greg corrected. That's literally what interviews are. Meghan stood up abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected. Disrespected? Greg remained seated, his voice calm. What have I said that was disrespectful? Your entire tone, Meghan said. The way you're looking at me. The implications in your questions. I'm looking at you the same way I look at every guest, Greg said. And my questions have been straightforward. If you're uncomfortable answering them, that's different from being disrespected. You know what your problem is? Meghan said, pointing at him. You can't handle a strong woman who doesn't bow down to your authority. Greg actually laughed at that. Meghan, I've interviewed some of the most powerful women in the world. Supreme Court justices, CEOs, military leaders. Not one of them has ever suggested that asking questions was about not handling strong women. They understood that being strong means being able to defend your positions. I don't need to defend anything to you, Meghan said. Then why did you come on the show? Greg asked simply. Meghan opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked around at her team standing off camera. This is ridiculous. I was told this would be a respectful conversation. It has been respectful, Greg said. You just don't like that I'm not treating you like royalty. This is America. We don't do that here. Clearly, Meghan said with disgust. You don't do manners either. Oh, we do manners, Greg said, his patience clearly wearing thin. We say please and thank you. We shake hands when we meet someone. We don't show up with an entourage and act like everyone should be grateful we're in the room. I'm done, Meghan announced. She started removing her microphone. We still have 12 minutes left, Greg noted. Not anymore, Meghan said. I will not sit here and be attacked by someone who makes a living mocking people. I make a living offering commentary and having conversations, Greg said, and I've been nothing but professional. You're the one who walked in acting entitled and got upset when you weren't treated like you're special. Meghan's face went red. Special? I've spent years being torn apart by people. Years. And I come here trying to have a meaningful dialogue, and you ambush me with hostile questions. Name one hostile question, Greg challenged. Just one. All of them, Meghan shouted. The audience was riveted. This was unlike anything they'd ever seen. I asked you about your project, Greg said, counting on his fingers. I asked about your views on privacy. I asked how you balance public and private life. Which of those was hostile? The way you asked them, Meghan insisted. So it's not what I asked. It's that I asked it all, Greg said. Because you expected to come here, say whatever you wanted, and have me nod along like everyone else does. Everyone else? Meghan's voice went up another octave. Everyone else tears me down. You're all the same. You all want to see me fail. I don't want to see you fail, Greg said quietly. I don't even know you well enough to want anything regarding you. I just wanted to have a conversation. A real one, not a puff piece. A real conversation involves respect, Meghan said. It also involves honesty, Greg replied. And honestly, you've been condescending since you walked out here. You wouldn't shake my hand. You dismissed my experiences. You accused me of attacking you when I asked normal questions. And now you're throwing a fit because you're not being worshipped. That's it, Meghan said. She threw her microphone down on the chair. I'm leaving. Your choice, Greg said. But you're proving every criticism people have about you. That you can't handle disagreement. That you expect special treatment. That you play the victim when things don't go your way. Meghan spun around. You don't get to say that to me. I just did, Greg said, because this is my show. You're a guest, and guests don't get to dictate terms. Unbelievable, Meghan muttered. She looked at her team. We're going. Now. One of her assistants rushed forward with a jacket. Meghan snatched it and started walking toward the exit. Just so you know, Greg called after her, walking out doesn't make you look strong. It makes you look like you can't defend your positions. Meghan stopped. For a moment, it seemed like she might turn around. The entire studio held its breath. Then, she kept walking. And there she goes, Greg said to the camera. America. That was Meghan Markle, who apparently believes that being asked questions is the same as being attacked. We'll be right back after this break. Assuming I'm allowed to ask our next guest anything. The audience erupted in applause. Not polite applause. Real, genuine appreciation for what they just witnessed. As the commercial break began, Greg sat back in his chair and shook his head. His producer rushed over. That was insane, the producer said. That was telling, Greg replied. She couldn't handle 5 minutes of basic questions. Do you think she'll retaliate? The producer asked. Probably, Greg said. But what's she going to say? That I asked her about her projects and her public statements? That I didn't treat her like she's above questioning? Back in the green room, Meghan was reportedly yelling at her team about why they'd booked her on the show in the first place. Staff members could hear her from down the hall, insisting that she'd been ambushed and set up. But the tape would tell a different story. When viewers watched the interview later, they'd see exactly what happened. A host trying to have a substantive conversation. A guest who expected softballs and reverence. And a meltdown when reality didn't match expectations. Greg returned from commercial break with his usual energy. Welcome back. Well, that was something. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never had a guest walk out because I asked them basic questions. But here's the thing. This is exactly what we talk about on this show. The idea that certain people think they're above scrutiny. That asking questions is somehow an attack. That disagreement equals disrespect. He leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. We don't do that here. Everyone who sits in that chair gets asked real questions. I don't care if you're a duchess, a CEO, a politician, or anyone else. You come on this show, you defend your positions. That's the deal. And if you can't handle that, maybe television isn't for you. The audience applauded again. Now, Greg continued, I'm sure there will be people who say I was too hard on her. that I should have been more gentle. But why? Why should someone be treated with kid gloves just because of who they married? This is America. We judge people on their merits, their ideas, their character, not their titles. He shuffled his papers. And look, if Meghan Markle wants to come back and actually have a conversation, the door's open. But she needs to understand that conversation goes both ways. You don't just get to make statements without being asked to explain them. That's not how this works. In homes across the country, viewers were texting each other, posting on social media, calling friends. The clips would be everywhere within hours. Not because of what Greg did, but because of what Meghan revealed about herself. The inability to handle basic scrutiny. The immediate jump to victimhood. The theatrical exit. Greg wrapped up the show with his usual segments, but everyone knew what people would remember. Not the jokes, not the other guests, not the commentary on current events. They'd remember the moment a duchess walked off a set because she was asked to explain herself. As the credits rolled and the studio audience filed out, they were already talking about what they'd witnessed. This wasn't just a celebrity meltdown. It was a perfect illustration of everything Greg had been saying for years. That some people live in bubbles where they're never challenged. That they confuse disagreement with persecution. That they believe their feelings matter more than facts or accountability. The production crew started breaking down the set. Greg stood up, stretched, and headed to his dressing room. His phone was already blowing up with messages from colleagues and friends who'd watched the interview. One text made him smile. It was from a fellow host. Did that really just happen? Greg typed back, "Yep. Sometimes people tell you exactly who they are. You just have to give them the opportunity." And that's exactly what had happened. In less than 20 minutes, Meghan Markle had shown a national television audience that she expected deference, not dialogue. That she wanted a platform, not a conversation. That she believed her status entitled her to special treatment. Greg had simply refused to play along. He'd done what he always did. Asked questions, pushed back on inconsistencies, and treated his guest like any other person. The fact that this was seen as controversial said more about society's expectations than it did about his approach. The story would dominate news cycles for days. People would debate who was right, who was wrong, whether Greg had been too tough or whether Meghan had been too sensitive. But the tape didn't lie. Anyone who watched could see exactly what happened. A host did his job. A guest couldn't handle it. And television audiences got a rare glimpse of what happens when someone used to being coddled encounters someone who refuses to coddle. That's the thing about live television. You can't edit it. You can't take it back. You can't control the narrative after the fact. What happens, happens. And what happened that night was a masterclass in how entitlement reacts to accountability. Greg never claimed to be perfect. He'd had plenty of interviews that went poorly. Moments he wished he could take back. Questions he'd phrased better in hindsight. But this wasn't one of those times. He'd been fair, direct, and professional throughout. The same couldn't be said for his guest. As the studio emptied and the lights dimmed, one thing was clear. This interview would be remembered. Not as the time Greg Gutfeld was cruel to a duchess, but as the time a duchess proved she couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. And in America, that's exactly how it should be. No special treatment, no free passes, just honest questions and the expectation that if you're going to be in the public eye, you need to be able to explain yourself. Meghan Markle failed that test spectacularly, and the whole world watched.